Hey, it's Brett, and this is Brett and some books, or accountability checks and balances party. Um, this is the shithole I call home. Co-optation in Milwaukee's George Floyd Rebellion by Anarchothoughtism Collective, and this was published in 2023, November 5th. There's a lot wrong with this little Rust Belt city. It's hard to love, almost painful. Yet people here try to do it anyway, often to our own detriment. We critique this city scathingly, but we love Milwaukee too. Black Milwaukeeans work hard to carve out a cultural niche. It's a city that's been shit on so much that it's developed an inferiority complex. It demands recognition, for better or worse. I joke that living here would be funny if it wasn't our lives. Oftentimes it is funny, in a sad, nihilistic, and absurdist way. You have to laugh to keep from crying. The structural issues of Milwaukee are deeply enmeshed, feeding into each other and compounding the struggles its black underclass must face. The city's cultural undercurrent is marked by distinct apathy, conservatism, and complacency. Individualist and bourgeois aspirations are rife. Small pockets of resistance bubble up, only to be extinguished by petty bourgeois endeavors such as the nonprofit industrial complex, NPIC, activist grifters, or the business class. This allows for highly fascistic elements to develop without resistance. The 2016 Sherman Park Uprising is a prime example of such an extinguishing. Milwaukee is known as the worst place for black people to live and the most segregated city in the United States, and as Harvard for pimps. Black people have been locked out of homeownership, with only 25.2% of black Milwaukeeans actually owning homes. A culture around stolen vehicles, we call them stolies, holds fast. Kia boys and Kia girls drive throughout the city recklessly, giving MPD, Milwaukee Police Department, a run for their money. To be fair, most people in Milwaukee drive recklessly. Lives are ended or altered by gun violence. You can't trust tap water because of the lead pipes. Out-of-state slumlords own too much property, resulting in poorly kept homes, leading to excessive electrical fires and evictions. The homeless remain mostly unseen, systemically pushed into surrounding forests. Milwaukee Police Department takes up more than half of the city budget, and their pensions are bankrupting the city. As a result, libraries will close, fire stations and ambulances will operate at reduced capacities. In 2 to 3 years, a youth prison will be built here. Conditions feel overwhelmingly grim. Following the murder of Civil Smith by MPD in 2016, Sherman Park erupted in flames, and the uprising that ensued lasted for 3 days. Rioters looted and burned down a BP gas station. This was not senseless or random. Black community members had been frequently profiled by owners of this particular BP station and frequently had Milwaukee Police Department called on them. A month before the murder of Smith, an employee fired a gun in the air to intimidate a group of teenagers standing in front of the store, claiming that he feared for his life. As rioting progressed, rocks were hurled at local law enforcement, a bank was set ablaze, and a local liquor store was looted. The city of Milwaukee was transfixed, yet what followed in the wake of that moment seemed a dizzying blur. Over 2 to 3 years, conversation shifted abruptly from police brutality, racism, and state violence to entrepreneurship. Almost as quickly as it happened, outside investors swooped in to develop what is now known as Sherman Phoenix, a collection of 30 black-owned businesses housed within the former BMO Harris Bank that was burnt down during the riots. Before this shift, Sherman Park resident and youth mentor activist Vaughn Mays was framed by both MPD and federal agents for the attempted firebombing of the District 7 police station at the height of the riots. Though the case against him remains ambiguous in its resolution, May's case and eventual release from state custody garnered him an abundance of local media attention, alongside undue credit as a reliable community activist. Soon after that ordeal, Mays began dubbing himself Milwaukee's Malcolm X, though his politics were moderate and inconsistent. His influence would later play a role in stunting Milwaukee's 2020 protests. The officer who killed Civil Smith was acquitted of the murder. However, he was discharged from MPD and spent some time in prison for a series of sexual assaults. In 2020, Smith's family was awarded a $4 million settlement from the city of Milwaukee. Over the past 10 years, Milwaukee has spent $40 million on police misconduct settlements. This is not justice. It never will be. Justice cannot exist for black folks within this system. Our own hands must forge a new path. Nonprofits, the worst jobs we've ever worked. Content warning, rape, and sexual assault. Milwaukee nonprofits are closely linked with MPD. More often than not, they aid in advancing the carceral state through partnerships and broad coalitional work. One member of our collective was introduced to the NPIC when they were 16 years old by members of the ACLU Wisconsin, when the latter visited their high school classes to speak with students about their civil rights and electoralism. By the time our comrade hit 19, they had dropped out of college and had their first real experience working in the NPIC through an American Corps program. They were paid $17,000 a year and received additional food stamp benefits. For how little was paid, it could be argued that work involving social services and the NPIC is a twisted type of exploitation that normalizes the commoditization of marginalized people's life experiences, even as it normalizes the extraction of their labor and their harassment abuse within the NPIC structures. During their stint with this organization, our comrade worked directly with women involved in street-based prostitution. In this supposed harm reduction-based approach, our comrade was often forced to work directly with police to maintain the symbiotic relationship their employer had with district attorneys, the House of Corrections, a county jail that falls under the Division of Adult Institutions but operates somewhat independently from them, and law enforcement organizations writ large. This placed our comrades and their workers in the impossible position of offering little material support or social supports to trafficking victims in exchange for tracking them and discussing their cases regularly with police and community members that viewed the presence of trafficked women as a blight. Our comrade remembers their time with this organization as one of the most traumatic periods of their life, as they worked to provide compassionate and appropriate care to victims of sexual violence, sometimes in emergencies. They were simultaneously experiencing violence within their org that overlapped the violence they were expected to help combat in the streets. Gender-based harassment from supervisors and assault at the hands of a coworker some months into the job, coupled with the daily trauma absorption of the job, eventually took its toll. Our comrades' mental health declined, as did their performance, and they were let go. They recall there was relief in that moment and remained unemployed for a few months while seeking therapy to heal. Another comrade never even made it that far. As a transplant, this comrade, with years of nonprofit experience working with youth and other marginalized communities, decided to volunteer with various organizations to gain both a better map of the city and to better understand where they could apply their passion effectively. Despite becoming a dues-paying member of at least two supposedly radical orgs, The only jobs they were being told about were ones that would exacerbate pre-existing health problems. Through two different periods of homelessness, this comrade still managed to show up and organize or lend support wherever they believed good community work was being done. Eventually, our comrade's persistence and organizing chops developed, and the NPIC began sniffing around. Our comrade began being flattered and specifically invited to brainstorming sessions, a quirky Milwaukee euphemism that essentially serves three functions for nonprofits. The first is the crowdsourcing language and popular, if inconsistent, definitions of social problems. The second, to pull in and start cultivating so-called leadership skills in individuals who may be able to be exploited by nonprofits through low-pay positions or as uncompensated volunteers. The third function by nonprofit being pure extraction, wherein community members are invited to rough out projects or initiatives that grassroots formations seldom can bankroll, but pose no financial risk to NPIC orgs that regularly receive millions from the state to water down and scale up. Catching on to the grift, however, is not always a guarantee that one's boundaries around labor would be respected. When our comrade began politely declining invitations to these brainstorming sessions, they were eventually lured into applying for part-time positions with the same organizations that would allow them to keep their health benefits while earning an income, which made our comrade eagerly apply to all. Experience notwithstanding, our comrade found that the fishing expeditions of the brainstorming sessions were not yet done with them, though it took the better part of a year, during which our comrade filled out multiple applications, underwent numerous background checks, weirdly intensive demands for outlines of programming they had not yet been hired to facilitate, and oddly probing interviews with the occasional direct questions about their anarchist leanings. Our comrade realized that these nonprofits had no intention of hiring them so much as simply extracting their labor, as well as intimate personal information, under the guise of community building. Some years after the compliment stopped, our comrade simply withdrew from the NPIC and organizing publicly, preferring to work only with those who respected their boundaries. For a disabled person who could not leave their home much, severing ties to the NPIC represented an end to the social life they badly needed for their well-being. Abolishing the NPIC abolished the celebrity career activist and black misleadership class. The NPIC culture demands much from marginalized workers while offering very little in return. Nonprofits market themselves as more just or equitable workplaces for marginalized people, but often they just offer the same capitalist shit, gilded in the rhetoric of false radicalism. In this way, the NPIC exploits the desires of those who wish to build a better world and change the material conditions of oppression, knowing they will never be able or inclined to address oppression at its roots. Nonprofits that portray themselves as radical or revolutionary are actively lying. The NPIC is an apparatus of an imperialistic, white supremacist, ableist, capitalistic state. It serves to redirect radical energies into neoliberal, ineffective organizing methods. Its function is to maintain the status quo. Those who disrupt or refuse to sell out are pushed out. One of the worst byproducts of the NPIC and social media culture is the production of the celebrity activist or career activist. What we're describing is nothing new. Sellouts have existed across generations. It's become more complicated, nuanced, and insidious with the appropriation of radical aesthetics and language. When we think of this type of sellout, elements of George Jackson's criticism against Bill Cosby and black capitalism are applied nearly 50 years later. Quote, Black capitalism, black against itself, the silliest contradiction in a long train of spineless, mindless contradictions. We can never learn to trust as long as we have them. They are as much a part of repression, more even than the real live rat and former pig. End quote. George Jackson, Soledad Brother. The black celebrity career activists are rooted in the ideology of black capitalism, tainted by the entrepreneurial bourgeois aspiration and opportunism. Their politics are shallow and unprincipled. Coming out of the George Floyd rebellion, one of the most prominent and glaring examples of this is Patrisse Cullors and mishandling of donations made to the BLM Black Lives Matter Foundation. Despite being a trained Marxist, Patrisse accepted deals with Cadillac and owned several million-dollar homes while chapters of BLM struggled to organize on the ground. Patrisse profited in one of the most direct ways possible from the deaths and oppression of black people. How many more Patrisse Cullors types do we need to see? During protests against the police killings of Alvin Cole in Wauwatosa, Jay-Z's Team Rock took the opportunity to generate positive press for the brand, posting bail and covering legal fees for those arrested, including Alvin Cole's family. The celebrity also took out a full-page ad in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel calling for Alvin Cole's murderer, Joseph Mensah, to be prosecuted. Additionally, Tamika Mallory made an appearance offering a performative press conference. While support from celebrities like Jay-Z may appear beneficial on a surface level, the ultra-wealthy do not and will never sustain local movement or revolutionary activity. Jay-Z has repeatedly shown his allegiance to capital, and his support aims to co-opt the energy of mass movements and encourage the black masses to buy into the myths of black capitalism. In Elite Capture by Olufemi Taiwo, the author references the work of Frantz Fanon, Jared A. Ball, and Franklin Frazier to elaborate on the myths of the black economy and black buying power. In describing African middle class and post-colonial Algeria, Fanon postulated that this middle class would, quote, capture, dilute, and ultimately subvert the energy of anti-imperialistic struggle, end quote. Taiwo notes that Fanon's prediction came to be, quote, the national independence movement supplanted formal colonial rule only to run headfirst into neocolonialism, a condition in which these young nations' new ruling elite were either sharply constrained by or actively colluding with corporations and governments of the former colonial powers and the international system they dominated, end quote. Taiwo goes on to analyze Franklin Frazier's Black Bourgeoisie and the idea of escaping racial strife through a separate black economy, citing Booker T. Washington's National Negro Business League. The combined net worth of all 115s of the inaugural National Negro Business League did not amount to even $1 million. By the time Frazier wrote this book, more than 6 decades later, all 11 black-owned banks in the nation combined did not represent the amount of capital held in the average local bank in smaller white cities. Drawing from Ball, Taiwo concludes that investing in the idea of a black economy is politically naive, a fruitless endeavor that would need to be birthed of our current political and economic reality of white supremacy and racial capitalism. He notes that myths of black buying power and financial literacy only serve to place the onus on the poor instead of on the exploitative nature of capitalism. We see the myth persist to this day through the endeavors such as Killer Mike's Greenwood Bank. The possibility of an insulated black economy is the myth, while the immediate interests of a few well-positioned black folk provide the true impetus, end quote. For petty bourgeois aspirationals, and the ultra-wealthy, the NPIC provides the perfect platform for co-optation of our mass movements. Protests become photo opportunities. Elements of resistance and revolution are appropriated to market an individual's brand or NGO to philanthropists, funders, and sponsors. Brand recognition is key. Locally, we've witnessed executive directors and NGO boards claim police abolition, only to turn around and hire ex-police officers to perform union busting on their behalf. We've seen blatant misogynists and homophobes win the title of Activist of the Year throughout a nearly endless stream of self-congratulatory award ceremonies. Milwaukee suffers an ongoing plague of micro-celebrity activists, bolstered by an NPIC culture that actively blocks opportunities for effective, revolutionary organizing. Our point is simplistic. The conclusion feels trite, but it's a message Milwaukeeans need to hear. If any real work is to get done, the NPIC and career celebrity activism need to be abandoned or eventually destroyed. How Milwaukee got a youth prison, past to present. Content warning: sexual abuse, child abuse. Milwaukee's NPIC is deeply connected to the carceral justice system and policing, and many violence prevention programs and nonprofits are incentivized to work with the police to receive funding from the city. Unsurprisingly, local nonprofits ushered in a new youth prison in Milwaukee. To explain how all this came to fruition, we will need to lay some ground and talk about the Lincoln Hills and Copper Lakes crises that occurred over the course of a decade. Tracking everything that occurred at these facilities could amount to a separate book on its own, so we'll only be tackling a tiny fraction of events in this section. According to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, the problems began in 2010 to 2011 under Republican Governor Jim Doyle's administration, although I believe that is a correction. I think Jim Doyle was Democrat. However, the number of youth prisoners had steadily decreased over the years, and in 2011, inmate populations dropped to half of what they were in 2004. For the Doyle administration, it financially did not make sense to continue running 3 separate facilities: Lincoln Hills, located in northern Wisconsin, Ethan Allen School in southeastern Wisconsin, and Southern Oaks Girls School in southeastern Wisconsin. Lincoln Hills operated at a much lower cost than the other 2 facilities, and state law mandated that a juvenile facility must remain open in northern Wisconsin. This law did not apply to southeastern parts of the state, where most of Wisconsin's black and incarcerated population stemmed from. By January 2011, Republican Governor Scott Walker was instated. He moved quickly to close Ethan Allen School and Southern Oaks Girls School, while consolidating 100 prisoners into Lincoln Hills and doubling the prison population. Lincoln Hills was extremely short-staffed, the sparse population of northern Wisconsin being to blame. The Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel stated, quote, "Juvenile justice experts around the nation were recommending smaller, more localized facilities. Wisconsin went in the opposite direction, consolidating operations in a remote setting," end quote. In February 2012, Racine County Circuit Judge Richard Krull sent a memo to Scott Walker detailing a case of abuse. The memo Krull sent to Walker described an incident in which an inmate from Racine was forced to perform oral sex on his roommate and then beaten unconscious. Workers learned of the assault at 4 p.m. They didn't get the victim medical treatment for 3 hours, according to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. In 2014, when Milwaukee-based public defender Robin Dorman learned that one of her clients was not receiving medical treatment or being sent to classes, she quickly learned that her client was not alone. Upon discovering additional allegations of abuse and neglect, Dorman sent a memo to the Milwaukee County Chief Deputy District Attorney Kent Laverne, who forwarded it to the Department of Corrections. By January 2015, a criminal probe was launched to investigate Lincoln Hills. What the investigations would unveil was deeply disturbing. Most of the youth held in the facility were black children from Milwaukee, though the facility was located in Irma, Wisconsin, 215 miles away from Milwaukee, a 3.5-hour drive. Horrendous abuse and corruption plagued these facilities, ranging from physical child abuse to suicidal and sexual abuse and harassment of minors. The Milwaukee Journal Sentinel details the conditions inside of facilities, describing a teen who had his foot crushed by a prison guard. Quote, inside his room, Evans screamed and held up his foot so the staff could see the bleeding. The Milwaukee teen has lost parts of 2 small toes, but it would take prison officials nearly 2 hours to take him to a hospital 15 miles away. End quote. Another incident involved a psychologist commenting on a teen girl's breasts, adding that they looked, quote, rode hard and put away wet, end quote. The investigation also revealed that the prison's lead trainer taught staff to pin inmates by putting their knees on inmates' backs, a technique that could cause suffocation and death. This trainer did not contact nurses when inmates were injured. There were 4 incidents where inmates had broken bones. By December 2015, the facility was raided by 50 state agents, and the investigation was turned over to the FBI. Over a dozen staff members quit, were fired, or retired. A $25 million settlement was reached for those who stayed at the facilities. In 2018, Governor Walker announced a plan to dissolve Lincoln Hills into 5 smaller prisons spread out across the state. In April 2022, Democratic Governor Tony Evers signed a law that would bring a prison to Milwaukee. By January 2023, Milwaukee Commons Council approved the zoning for a new youth prison to be built on the predominantly black northwest side of Milwaukee. The facility will not be operational until 2026. The decision was made to put the youth prison in a district that completely lacks an alderperson at the time of this writing. The previous alderperson and woman, Chantia Lewis, was removed from office after pleading guilty to embezzling $20,000 in campaign funds. Residents were taken off guard by the development of the prison, and a majority opposed it, citing the potential decrease in property values as their primary concern. Many nonprofit leaders spoke out in support of the facility's relocation to Milwaukee's northwest side, however, framing it as a way to bring the youth inmates from Lincoln Hills home. Charlene Moore, co-founder of the nonprofit Urban Underground and youth justice advocate, stated, "We have to figure something out. We have to put them somewhere." End quote. Representatives from the nonprofit Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing, Expo, echoed Charlene's statement. There are currently 69 youths that remain at the Lincoln Hills and Copper Lakes facilities. Alternatives to prison exist. We're dealing with people, not objects to shuffle around or put somewhere. And that'll be all for this half, and then the second half will be up soon. Thank you, and like and subscribe if you want to check out more. I have a whole playlist called pamphlets and zines or something like that. It's an obvious playlist for what it is, and this will be part of it. If you want to check out some other ideas and listen to other essays, I'd love to share what I've learned with you. Peace.